Somewhere in the eastern folds of the Siberian mountains, where the land rises sharply into ridges of gray stone and the sky sits heavy and low for most of the year, there is a village that does not appear on most maps. It has no official name that outsiders use. The people who live there simply call it home. A scattering of dark timber houses press into the hillside as if leaning away from the wind. Smoke rises from every chimney, thin and white, against a sky the color of old iron. The snow here does not melt in April. It thickens and settles and groans under its own weight on the rooftops, and the mountains above hold their white mantles without apology. This is not the edge of the world, but on mornings like this one, it feels very close to it. The Volkov family has lived in this valley for 4 generations. The grandfather came here as a young man, following reindeer herders and staying because the land asked him to stay. His son built the main house with his own hands, cutting larch timber from the lower slopes and curing it through 2 winters before laying a single wall. Now that son, Mikhail, is the age his own father was when the house was finished. He is a broad man, not tall, with hands that look as though they were carved from the same wood as his home. His wife, Nadezhda, runs the household with quiet authority, knowing exactly where every jar of preserved berry, every strip of dried fish, and every folded cloth is kept. Their 2 children, a girl of perhaps 12 and a boy several years younger, move through the morning like small animals, purposeful, unhurried, already learning the grammar of survival. It is Easter week. The Orthodox calendar governs the rhythm of life here as surely as the seasons do, and the 2 are not so different from each other. Both demand patience, both reward preparation, both pass through darkness before arriving at light. The family has been preparing for this feast for many days, setting aside what was gathered, what was salted, what was dried and stored through the long months when the mountains made every journey an act of determination. Today, everything they have been saving comes forward. The morning begins before the sun clears the eastern ridge. The wind comes down from the high passes with a sound like distant water, constant, directionless, finding every gap between timber planks and pressing cold fingers through. Outside, the temperature sits well below freezing. The snow in the yard has a crust on it from the night, and each footstep breaks through with a sound like cracking bone. Mikhail moves across this surface to the animal shelter at the edge of the property, his breath a steady cloud around his face. Inside, the smell is of hay and animal warmth, something earthy and alive that is almost shocking after the clean sterility of the cold outside. The sheep stand quietly. He has already chosen which animal will be taken for Easter. The choice was made days ago, in the way that difficult choices are made in places like this. Slowly, practically, without sentiment, but also without cruelty. The lamb is young, well fed through the winter on stored hay and grain. What follows is handled with the seriousness that the act deserves. There is no haste. Mikhail works as his father taught him, and as his grandfather taught his father, with precision and respect for the animal that is giving its life to feed the family through this sacred week. The body is prepared carefully in the cold air outside, hung from a thick beam under the shelter's overhang, the steam rising from it in the freezing morning like something being released. The cold is useful here. It does the work that other places would need machinery or ice to do. The carcass is cleaned, the cuts separated with knowledge passed down, not in books, but in hands. Nadezhda has been working in the kitchen since before her husband went to the animals. The kitchen is the warmest room in the house, the only truly warm room, and the iron stove at its center has been burning since the middle of the night. She tends it with the attention of someone who understands that fire is not decoration here. It is the center of everything. She feeds it split larchwood, each piece set in with care, and the stove breathes and ticks and radiates a heat that makes the air above it shimmer slightly. On its surface, a wide iron pot holds water already coming toward a boil. Around her, the surfaces of the kitchen are covered in the quiet evidence of preparation. Cloth sacks of flour, a crockery bowl of eggs gathered over many days and kept in the cold pantry, dried herbs in small bundles hanging from the ceiling beams, jars of preserved onion and wild garlic picked from the valley floor the previous summer. The bread comes first. It always comes first in a household like this. Nadezhda works the dough with both hands, pressing and folding and turning on a wooden board worn smooth by decades of the same motion. The flour is coarse, the kind that leaves a particular roughness on the palms, and as she works, her arms move with an ease that speaks of 10,000 repetitions. The dough is dense and resistant at first, pulling back against her hands, but she is patient, and eventually it yields, becomes elastic, smooth, alive in the way that only bread dough is alive. She shapes it into 2 large rounds and sets them to rest near the stove, covered with a cloth that has done this duty many times before. The kitchen smells of raw grain and warmth and wood smoke, a smell so particular to this place and this morning that it would be recognizable nowhere else on earth. While the dough rests and rises, the younger child comes into the kitchen and stands near the stove without speaking, warming the palms of his hands against its side. His mother does not send him away. She hands him a small task, holding a bowl, fetching something from the pantry shelf. And he does it with the seriousness of someone who understands that he is part of something important. His sister is outside with her father, helping carry the cut lamb sections inside, her arms full of cold meat that she holds against her coat without complaint. These children are not performing helpfulness. They are simply helping, because in this house, in this valley, helping is the same as breathing. Mikhail brings the main cut inside, the whole hindquarter and the saddle together, a substantial weight that he sets on the kitchen table with a sound of dense meat against old wood. Nadezhda examines it briefly, then begins. She works the surface with coarse salt pressed in with the heel of her hand, then dried herbs, something sharp and resinous from the high meadows, something that in summer smells of sun-warmed stone. She adds preserved onion from a jar, the pieces soft and slightly golden, and presses them into the meat along with strips of dried wild garlic. The smell of the herbs opening in the cold fat of the lamb is immediate and complex, a smell that seems to belong to the mountains themselves. The prepared meat goes into the largest pot they own, covered with cold water from the barrel by the door, and set on the stove to begin its long work. For the next several hours, the kitchen holds its breath in a good way. The pot simmers, not boiling hard, but moving slowly, the surface broken by small, gentle bubbles that release steam into the air in long, patient columns. The cold outside presses against the windows, but inside the steam rises and the bread bakes in the oven section of the stove, and the smell that builds in the room is extraordinary. It is the smell of fat rendering slowly into broth, of onion dissolving into something sweeter than it began, of herbs releasing everything they stored from last summer's brief warmth into the liquid that will eventually become the soup that opens the feast. Nadezhda adds more wood to the fire without being asked by anyone. She simply knows when it needs it. The bread comes out of the oven dark on its base and golden on its dome, and when she taps the bottom with one knuckle, it returns a hollow sound that means it is done. She sets it on the board and the crust crackles faintly as it cools and contracts, a sound like the village itself settling after a long day. The inside, when she eventually cuts it, is dense and slightly chewy, the crumb irregular and honest, steaming slightly at the cut edge. In the cold air near the window, where she sets it to firm, the steam rises from the cut face and disappears. When the family sits together in the late afternoon, the light has already begun to go. Outside, the wind has picked up again, and the temperature is falling toward the kind of cold that makes the stars look brittle. But inside, around the low table, the meal is set. The lamb broth, deep amber now and fragrant, is ladled into thick clay bowls. The lamb itself has been lifted from the pot and set on a board at the center, the meat falling from the bone with almost no encouragement, soft all the way through, the surface glistening. The bread is torn rather than cut. There is a dish of preserved fish from the river, salt cured through the winter and now rinsed and served simply with nothing added. There is a small pitcher of cold milk from the goat kept in the shelter. There is nothing superfluous. The family eats without hurry. Outside, the Siberian night assembles itself in the mountains, enormous and indifferent and very cold. Inside, the stove breathes steadily, and the lamplight moves slightly in a draft from somewhere in the old walls. Steam rises from the bowls and from the lamb and from the bread, where hands have torn it open. This is not a story about poverty or hardship, though both are present in the edges of everyday here. It is a story about people who understand their place in a world that is much larger and much older than they are, and who have found, over generations, the particular and precise way to live within it. The feast they share on this Easter evening is not an escape from their lives. It is the very center of their lives. The fire that justifies all the cold that surrounds it, the warmth that makes the surviving worthwhile. In this valley, between these mountains, under this sky, the food they make together is not simply nourishment. It is memory and faith and proof that they are here.